Hi, everyone. Oh, what a day. I'm back doing the Cranky Lawyer Legal Livestream. I skipped last week, and this week I wanted to pick up again and cover the vaccine court. I'm doing this a little bit late today because I had a little bit of an emergency. I thought I ran over my dog when I was backing up my car because I heard a yelp, and I had to take my dog to the vet, but it turned out that she's fine, thank goodness. I think my car did somehow did hit my dog a little bit, but the vet checked her out. She's walking on all her feet. She seems fine, and the vet has reassured me that Ruby is fine. So I'm very grateful for that. But now I'm back in the office, and I wanted to talk about the vaccine court. So what is the vaccine court? Why is it important for everyone to know what the vaccine court is? And what does it do? So I wanted to give out a hat tip to Mr. Bill Bunting on Facebook. I saw that Sandra Looney had shared a post by him on Facebook regarding some concern over vaccines, and actually included breastfeeding too, but I wanted to focus on vaccines for now because the topic is so complicated and the amount of information that I covered is so voluminous, so I just wanted to focus on that. So a little bit of background. So back in the 80s, what happened is that as the story goes, a lot of people were filing lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies over vaccine medication. And the pharmaceutical companies were basically coming out and saying that it is not becoming profitable for them to produce, manufacture, and sell vaccines. So, in the interest of public health, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, shortened to NCVIA, was passed in 1986. So, what the Vaccine Act does is it established a no-fault compensation system for claims by and on behalf of persons who suffered death or injury as a result of compulsory childhood vaccines. So before this act, whether it's aspirin, whether it's a type of food, whether it's an automobile, or whether it was a mandatory childhood vaccine, people went to court and they filed a lawsuit either individually or even on a class-wide basis called a class action to bring forth their allegations that the medications were faulty, were administered poorly, or whatever type of tort claim you may have. As a result of the Vaccine Act, a special compensation system was set up. So the idea is that you go through the system if you are claiming to be injured by mandatory childhood vaccines. And the idea, I suppose, back in the day was that it would be an abbreviated system to take care of these claims while also incentivizing pharmaceutical companies to continue to manufacture vaccines for the general public. So what is the vaccine court? Well, if you want to know the ins and outs of vaccine court, I urge you to go to my supporting documents, which I've uploaded. And you can go to the source documents, which are available on the court website, the Court of Federal Claims. But I just want to give you sort of a lay of the land view of what the vaccine court does. So, you file a claim in the vaccine court. It's a special court, and they have their own judges. Now, their judges are not called judges. They're called special masters, And these special masters sit in the vaccine court, and they hear those claims that people bring, alleging that they or their child or whomever they're bringing the lawsuit on the claim on behalf of has been injured by a mandatory vaccine. You do not get a trial by jury. Everything is handled by the special master. And these are appointed positions. These special masters are appointed. So I have a lot of information about how to file a petition. You have to have affidavits, you have to have medical records, you have to have proof of authority to file. And assuming you hit all of these bullet points, then you get a special master assigned who will hear your case. Now, in vaccine court, cases are bifurcated. Now, lawsuits can be bifurcated too, and what that means is generally there's two, I wouldn't say elements, but there are two categories that you must prove in court in order to, what I see, to get a satisfactory result. One is liability. In other words, are you entitled to anything at all to begin with? Okay, and that's the liability phase. And then the second phase is the damages phase. In vaccine court, my understanding is that in vaccine court, it's bifurcated. So you have a hearing before the special master, and I don't think these proceedings are necessarily even open to the public. And the special master will make a determination as to whether or not you're even entitled to anything at all, okay? And he'll render a judgment. And after that, you can either accept that judgment and proceed to the damages phase, where the special master determines how much compensation you are entitled under the vaccine court rules, or you can reject it and then proceed to file a civil suit. So let's talk about entitlement. I shouldn't say liability, because liability implies fault, and this is a no-fault court. In other words, you may be entitled to something, but that does not mean that the pharmaceutical company or whatever entity is on the other side is at fault. It's no fault. So in the entitlement hearings, there is a vaccine injury table, and I've uploaded that document. If you fit in the vaccine injury table, okay, there is, my understanding is, and by the way, I have to tell you, I have never argued a case in the vaccine court. So I am just giving you this explanation based on my reading of the documents and the legal research that I've looked at. But if you fall under certain specific categories of immediate reactions, there is a presumption that the vaccine caused it. So I'll give you an example. And if you go to the website and you go to the vaccine injury table, I'll give you one example. If, for example, you took the DTaP vaccine and you had anaphylaxis within 4 hours, the presumption is that that vaccine caused the anaphylaxis. And it says so right there, within 4 hours. So what happens if you have anaphylaxis outside of 4 hours, say 6 hours after you've had the DTaP vaccine? Then the entitlement is not presumed, and you have to prove it. You have to prove that the vaccine caused the anaphylaxis. And if the special master agrees that you are entitled to damages, then he'll render a ruling. And then the second phase is damages. Damages just means how much funds are you going to get, you or your child or whoever is bringing the claim. So the interesting thing about the vaccine court is that all damages are capped, okay? So let's talk about what those caps are. Let's say you bring a case. Let's say you, your child was, had a vaccine, a mandatory vaccine, and your child died. And you went to vaccine court, because remember, you cannot file a lawsuit in a court of law. You must go to vaccine court. That is what the Vaccine Act states. You are barred from filing a lawsuit in any court of law. You must first go through the vaccine court. So if you go to the special court where rulings are made by special masters, and the special master rules in your favor and says that the vaccine caused your child's death, then you will be entitled to $250,000 maximum. Okay. Now, let's say you didn't die. Let's say you or your child didn't die. Then you have what is called pain and suffering. Pain and suffering is, how do you put a dollar amount on the pain and the suffering that you or your child has experienced as a result of this vaccine? This is historically where juries have awarded large damages sums. In the vaccine court, pain and suffering is capped at $250,000. If you were unable to work during that time and you lost wages, you are also entitled to submit evidence of what your lost wages are. If you had to see medical professionals after your vaccine and incurred medical bills, you are entitled to submit those, and future medical needs as well. And it doesn't mean you'll get all of these elements compensated. It just means they are the categories that the vaccine court will entertain to be compensated. If you are not happy with the vaccine court's ruling, then you can take an appeal, and the appeal goes to the United States Court of Federal Claims, which is different from the federal circuit courts, to where run-of-the-mill district court civil cases are appealed to. And so some of the interesting things that I came across as I was looking into the vaccine court is, one thing I forgot to mention. Let's say you are awarded compensation by the vaccine court. I'm just going to make up a number. $250,000 for a death related to the administration of a vaccine. Where does that money come from? Is the maker of that vaccine paying the claimant? Actually, the answer is no. For every administration of a vaccine, there is a fee, okay? And this is collected from the administration of vaccines. Though that money goes into a fund, and the vaccine court administers that fund to pay out claims. Now, the question is, well, one question that struck me as well, what happens if they run out of funds? And, you know, that bears looking into, because the court that is ruling on these cases are actually responsible for managing the budget of paying these cases. And regardless of how the vaccine court rules in the case of claimants, no matter how those cases turn out, pharmaceutical companies really are not liable in any way, either directly or indirectly, in terms of payment. So in 2011, there was a case called Bruisewitz versus Wyeth. And, you know, this was an interesting case. The Bruisewitzes filed a claim in vaccine court claiming that the administration of a mandatory vaccine on their child caused very severe and long-lasting negative health repercussions. And the vaccine court did not rule in their favor. The vaccine court held that they could not find a causal link. And so the Bruisewitzes then filed in Pennsylvania State Court a lawsuit against the pharmaceutical company, stating that the vaccine that they administered was faulty. And the United States Supreme Court granted cert and held in that case that design defect cases, in other words, if you are claiming that a pharmaceutical company created a vaccine, there was something wrong with that vaccine, you cannot file a lawsuit. You must go to vaccine court. This is called a preemption argument. And what that means is, not only do you have a vaccine court where you bring these claims, that is the only place you can bring these claims. So I looked at two states, Florida and California. So now you have a situation where if you have what you perceive to be a legal claim against a vaccine manufacturer, whether your claim is that the vaccine itself was faulty, or whether your claim is that the vaccine itself may be efficacious, but your child had an unusually negative reaction to it, you now have a special venue, the vaccine court, where you must bring those claims. Now let's talk about the obligation to get these vaccines. Various states have passed local laws that make childhood vaccines mandatory. For example, in Florida, which is where my children live, where I live, Florida statute 1003.22 requires that each district school board and the governing authority of each private school shall establish and enforce as policy that prior to admittance to or attendance in a public or private school, grades kindergarten through 12, each child present or have on file with the school a certification of immunization. So in conjunction with the federal government, local state governments are working in concert to make vaccinations mandatory for the sake of the greater public good. Now, there are exemptions. You can read about how if you choose to exempt your child from mandatory vaccinations, there are very, very limited exemptions, and these change from state to state. In a prior legal live stream, I talked about the federal system. You have a state, you have a level of federal laws, and then each state makes their own laws, and depending on in which state you live, those exemptions can be more narrow than another state. So in Florida, there's a religious exemption and certain medical exemptions. And I believe a medical exemption is if your child has an immunodeficiency or an immune issue, then certain medical conditions would prohibit you from getting vaccinations. It would not be in your particular, it might possibly cause great health concern for you. So those are some exemptions. California, I looked at California. California Code, the Health and Safety Code, HSC section 120338. California states that the governing authority shall not unconditionally admit any person as a pupil of any private or public elementary or secondary school, child care center, day nursery, nursery school, ... unless prior to his or her first admission to that institution, he or she has been fully immunized. So you cannot go to school unless you've been immunized. California also has exemptions. These are the exemptions in California. Students enrolled in private homeschool programs. If you are being homeschooled, you are exempt from being immunized. Students enrolled in independent study and health reasons. Now, California very recently abolished the religious belief exemption. So in the state of California, even if it goes against your religious beliefs to become immunized, that is no longer an exemption, and it is mandatory. However, I don't think Florida has a homeschool exception. I have to look at that more closely. But as you can see, different states have different types of exemptions. So a little bit more about the Bruisewitz case. In the Bruisewitz versus Wyeth case, Russell and Robley Bruisewitz claimed that their daughter suffered from seizures and permanent disability after the DTP vaccine, and they claimed that this particular batch was faulty. It was an old batch, a lot of more than other batches. More children had an adverse reaction to it, and they wanted to have this heard in a court of law, and the Supreme Court held that all design defect claims must be pursued in vaccine court. And as you can imagine, vaccine court is no fault, and damages are capped, and damages are not paid by the pharmaceutical companies, and the procedures seem fairly, they have their own set of procedures, their own set of rules. I've uploaded some of the rules. And so if anybody if anybody thinks that they or someone or their children have been harmed by a vaccine, then I think it would behoove you to look at the vaccine court and the vaccine court's procedures if you wish to go through that process and try to get some sort of compensation. One other document that I uploaded is actually a view from the other side. I found this on the web. It's an article by Mr. David J. Waltz. Now, I don't know Mr. David J. Waltz. He's an attorney, and it looks like he represents pharmaceutical companies. So I thought this article was so interesting to show you how the view is from the other side of the I guess, the dispute. But it has a lot of good information about how a claimant proceeding in vaccine court, all the hurdles that he or she must go through in order to reach some sort of compensation or even manage to get to a civil case. One of the things I learned from this article is you have a certain timeline to file your claim in vaccine court. Okay, it's similar to a statute of limitations in regular court. Even if you know for a fact that you blew that deadline, you must first go through the vaccine court and go through that rigmarole, even though from the get-go you know you're going to lose because you blew the deadline in vaccine court. You must go through you must go through the vaccine court fully knowing that you will lose before you can even proceed to civil court. Now, you can reject the claim issued by the special master in the vaccine court, and within 90 days, you can notify them that you rejected, and then you proceed to file a civil action. You know, I don't know how many people actually choose to do that after going through the process in civil court. I don't know how many people actually do that. That is something that probably the vaccine court, that is data that the vaccine court probably has. I was not able to readily find it. Perhaps it may be available somewhere. But I thought this article by Mr. Waltz was so interesting because to me it indicated the very highly developed and arcane structure within the vaccine court with its own rules and regulations that claimants must go through in order to pursue their claim. Let me see if there's any questions. Why can't people sue the doctors? Thank you, Lorraine, for your question. The vaccine court covers faulty administration as well. So I would imagine you have, say, Wyeth or Merck or any sort of pharmaceutical company that makes these vaccines, and then you have your doctor administer them, right? So a vaccine can be perfectly fine, but a doctor, this is just a hypothetical. Let's say a doctor or a nurse or a medical professional screws up and gives your child 5 times the dosage. You know, it says that it's a vaccine-related injury. It's very broad. So I would imagine that that is a vaccine-related injury, and that too must go through the vaccine court. That's a very good question. Allison, that is correct. I don't think our court system or the Vaccine Act makes any bones about the fact that their goal is to insulate pharmaceutical companies from liability when they manufacture and dispense vaccines. They do enjoy complete legal indemnification. They don't even have to pay the damages in vaccine court. I don't think this is a secret. I don't think this is even something that the people running the vaccine court would argue with, that the goal is to provide indemnification because the pharmaceutical companies, it just wasn't profitable enough, so they were threatening to essentially stop vaccine manufacture. It just wasn't profitable enough for them. Okay, let me see if there's any other. Okay, let me scroll up here. Curious who these special masters work for. Who pays their salaries? Carrie, that's a great question. On the first page of my 14-page document that I uploaded, they serve 4-year terms, and the U.S. Court of Federal Claims appoints these masters and also has power to remove them. I would imagine that they're taxpayer funded, just like all the other judges and appointments that are in the federal court system. Oh, well, thank you, Lorraine. I haven't seen the movie Vaxxed. All the research I did was based on the court documents that are out there for people to navigate the vaccine court. So I went to the vaccine court source documents, and you can as well. I'm not really sure what SB 277 is, Allison. Is that the one where they, I'm not really sure, but I do know that California recently removed a religious vaccination exemption. Well, that's interesting, Michael. I did not know that the CDC holds patents on these vaccines. How many cases get resolved in the vaccine court? Are the records public? Oh, that must be Jared. I did not write that comment. Jared, I don't know. I do not know how many cases get resolved in the vaccine court. I have to be honest with you folks. The research here was so voluminous, I could quite possibly spend weeks and weeks and weeks looking into this. But I wanted to get a live stream out. That's an interesting question. Oh, I see. Thank you, Allison. Okay, so SB 277 in California removed the religious exemption. Now, Florida still has the religious exemption. So as you can see, different states are completely different in what exemptions they will honor. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions, I hope this has been educational for you. Please go to the reference documents link to look at all these documents that I've looked at myself, and my 14-page document of notes where my associate Beverly assisted me with this research. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have been able to finish it. And also Mr. Waltz's very interesting, helpful article that was written, I'm sure, for Big Pharma's eyes. And it was an interesting read for me. So thank you for tuning in. I will look into doing another live stream in about a week. And if you would like to support my live streams, please go to patreon.com, Elizabeth Lee Beck. I need to keep this separate from JAMPAC. This is not part of JAMPAC, and so JAMPAC is really dormant right now. So if you would like to support our endeavors in just these live streams, please feel free to become a patron sponsor on Patreon. And I wanted to give a shout out to Jason Goodman. Jason Goodman of Crowdsource the Truth. I saw him do interviews, and he has 3 phones that he sets up, and then he live streams directly to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And so he gave me some advice on what software to use to do that. So what I'm hoping is that these live streams, I'm hoping that I will be able to live stream this to all media so that people can find the information more readily. All right, thank you for tuning in. Hope everybody had a nice weekend, and hope everyone has a good week. Thank you.